the Son of Man has come eating and drinking, and you say, behold, a gluttonous man and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners.
Wow, starting right in the deep end today.
Yeah, we are. Today we're looking at a dinner party where an elite host's attempt to publicly humiliate his guest gets completely subverted by an uninvited, marginalized woman.
And it turns a respected religious leader into, the most spiritually impoverished person in the room.
Exactly. Our mission today is to uncover how the sources we're looking at, specifically the Scrolls and Secrets Luke 07 producer briefing show, every single societal power structure of the first century flipping completely upside down.
I mean, literally every structure, military, political, religious, social, they all just get dismantled piece by piece.
Right. But before we get into the weeds of the deep historical context of first century Roman occupation, I want to pose a mystery to you, our listener. Just keep this question in the back of your mind as we go. How does a Roman military commander, the literal face of a hostile occupation force, become the ultimate standard of faith for a Galilean peasant preacher?
It's such a great question, and to understand that, we really have to look at the geographical and, the political reality of where this narrative begins. The story opens in Capernaum.
Right, which is sitting right on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee.
Yeah, and this wasn't some quiet, sleepy fishing village. It was a border town with intense political and ethnic complexity.
So I'm trying to picture the power dynamic here. We have a centurion reaching out to Jesus for a favor, which feels, entirely backward for an occupied territory. What's the actual day-to-day role of this guy in a place like Capernaum?
Well, he's a salaried instrument of Roman occupation. A centurion commanded roughly 80 soldiers, which they called a century, and his job was to maintain order on behalf of an empire.
So he's part of the administrative and military apparatus enforcing the will of Rome.
Exactly. And ultimately, he answered to the governor of Syria. Men in this position were typically promoted directly from the ranks. They were chosen for their demonstrated competence, their character, and above all, their institutional loyalty.
They knew how the system worked.
Right. They knew how to maintain the hierarchy.
So he's the local enforcer. His mere presence is a threat to the local population. He makes sure everyone stays in line and pays their taxes. But the text says this specific centurion does something highly unusual. He actually funds the construction of the local synagogue.
He does, and we actually have physical evidence corroborating this kind of massive political patronage.
Wait, really?
Yeah, archaeological excavations in Capernaum have uncovered a first-century basalt foundation sitting right beneath a later white limestone synagogue structure on the site.
Oh, wow.
And that aligns directly with the local Jewish elders' claim in the text that he personally financed their place of worship.
Okay, let's unpack this. Building a religious center for the people you're occupying seems like a very calculated move. It's sophisticated political maneuvering.
Oh, absolutely. He's cultivating goodwill to navigate the ethnic tension of the area.
And it creates a massive debt of gratitude, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when his servant is dying, he doesn't mark up to Jesus and demand a miracle, which his rank would certainly allow him to try.
He could literally just give the order.
Yeah, but he doesn't. He sends Jewish intermediaries, the local elders, to ask on his behalf. And then he sends friends to stop Jesus from even entering his house.
Wait, he goes through all the trouble of calling for Jesus and then tells him to stay outside.
Yeah, the text may suggest his refusal to have Jesus enter his home reflects an awareness of Jewish purity customs regarding Gentile households.
Because entering a Roman soldier's house could render a Jewish teacher ritually unclean.
Right. The centurion sends word saying, essentially, don't come inside, just say the word. He recognizes Jesus' authority operates the exact same way his own military authority does.
He gives an order, and his soldiers obey.
Exactly. He believes Jesus can just give the order to the illness.
Let me put this in perspective. It's like a modern-day occupying general paying out of his own pocket to rebuild a local community center. Then, when he desperately needs a favor, he refuses to make the local grassroots leader walk into his military headquarters out of pure respect for the leader's cultural boundaries.
That's a great analogy.
He's saying, I know how authority works. You don't need to be here physically. Just give the order.
And it's a shocking social inversion. A Roman officer, a man with immense institutional power and lethal force at his disposal, is publicly deferring to a local Galilean preacher.
Anyone watching this play out in the streets of Capernaum would have been completely jarred.
Oh, without a doubt. And Jesus' reaction is what really seals it. In Luke 7:9, Jesus turns to the crowd following him and says, "I tell you, I have not found such great faith. No, not in Israel."
Which is huge.
Notice the double-edged nature of that statement. On one hand, Jesus is elevating an occupier, the very symbol of Rome's boot on the neck of Judea, to the highest example of trust.
And on the other hand, he's implicitly indicting his own people.
Right. He's telling the crowd that the ultimate standard of faith isn't found among their own religious elites, it's found in the Roman soldier.
So Jesus just elevated a Roman occupier, which undoubtedly offended the local religious crowd. And word of these controversial actions is spreading fast. In fact, that gossip is about to travel all the way east, slipping behind the bars of a political dungeon where a very specific prisoner is waiting for news.
John the Baptist.
Exactly. But before we get to John the Baptist's prison cell, we need to track where Jesus goes next because it triggers that news. Jesus leaves Capernaum and walks to a town called Nain.
Yeah, Nain sits in the Jezreel Valley, right near the hill of Moreh. As Jesus arrives at the town gate, he walks directly into a funeral procession. A widow's only son is being carried out.
I want to pause on the social reality of that. A widow losing her only son in the first century isn't just an emotional tragedy, it's an economic death sentence.
Completely. Without a male heir, she has no social safety net, no income, and no legal standing. She is facing absolute destitution.
And what does Jesus do?
The text states Jesus has compassion on her. He tells her not to weep, and then he touches the bier. He commands the young man to rise, and the dead man sits up and begins to speak.
Let me stop you there. When you say bier, we aren't talking about a closed wooden coffin.
Right. It's an open stretcher. That makes the visual of the dead man sitting up incredibly visceral because the entire crowd is watching the corpse directly.
Oh, man. So he just sits right up in front of everyone.
Yeah. When he sits up, the reaction is immediate fear and glorification of God. The crowd cries out, "A great prophet has arisen among us."
That specific phrasing feels loaded. They aren't just saying he's a powerful guy.
Not at all. For a first-century reader steeped in the Hebrew scriptures, alarms are going off. This scene connects directly to 2 Kings 4, where the prophet Elisha raised a widow's son in a nearby town called Shunem.
It's a geographic, too.
Exactly. By calling him a great prophet in that specific geographic region, the crowd is pointing to an ancient, powerful, prophetic lineage. And word of this miraculous resurrection spreads across all of Judea and the surrounding region.
Which brings us back to that dungeon. That news eventually reaches the disciples of John the Baptist, because John isn't in a position to come see this for himself.
No, he's not. John is locked in the fortress of Machaerus. This is a desolate, imposing stronghold located east of the Jordan River. He was imprisoned there by Herod Antipas.
And we need to define Herod Antipas here. He's a client king of Galilee, meaning he's a puppet.
Yes, he held his throne entirely at Rome's pleasure. John the Baptist had publicly criticized Herod's marriage to his brother's wife.
Which is a very dangerous move.
In that world, an influential religious figure interfering with the moral legitimacy of a politically fragile ruler carried a lethal price. John is sitting in a fortress, entirely at the mercy of a king who answers to Rome.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. John sends 2 of his disciples to Jesus with a pointed question. He asks, "Are you the one who is to come, or shall we look for another?" So I have a playback question here.
Okay, what is it?
Is this purely a theological question, or are we looking at the desperation of a man who staked his entire life on a claim, angered a lethal political system, and is now sitting in a dungeon realizing he's running out of time?
I mean, the text certainly frames it with that life or death tension. John the Baptist was a man of the wilderness, used to the open air of the Jordan, and now he's confined in a fortress awaiting execution.
It's a dark place to be in.
Yeah. Every miracle we've seen in the chapter so far, the centurion's servant, the widow's son, is sharpened by John's doubt in that cell. He needs confirmation that his impending death actually means something.
And Jesus doesn't just send back a simple, "Yes, it's me, hang in there." He doesn't offer any comforting platitudes about John's situation.
No. What's fascinating here is that Jesus quotes an exact catalog of Isaiah's messianic promises. He tells John's disciples in verse 22, "Go and tell John the things which you have seen and heard, that the blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised up, and the poor have good news preached to them."
He gives them the receipts.
He really does. He points to the physical evidence, including raising the dead, which just happened in Nain, and he forces John and the crowd to draw their own conclusions based on the prophecies.
But he also turns to the crowd and exposes their hypocrisy, right?
Yeah, he points out the crowd's inability to accept either of them. John was an ascetic, fasting in the wilderness, and the establishment rejected him as having a demon.
Right, and Jesus comes eating and drinking, as we noted in that opening quote, and they call him a glutton and a drunkard.
They just want to play a game where they make the rules, which perfectly sets the stage for a direct, intimate clash with the people who literally wrote the rules.
We are talking about the Pharisees.
Yes, the religious establishment.
Yes.
They held authority over interpretation of the law and community standing. Their power rested in their ability to define who was clean and who was unclean, who was in and who was out.
That brings us to the most dramatic moment of our deep dive, the dinner party at the house of a Pharisee named Simon.
So Roman dining conventions placed guests in a very strict hierarchy around the table. Everyone's position and how they were treated upon entry signaled their social status to the rest of the room.
And Simon invited Jesus to this dinner, but he deliberately withheld all the standard courtesies of hospitality.
Exactly.
No water for his dusty feet, no welcoming kiss, no oil for his head. And these aren't accidental oversights by a forgetful host. This is a calculated performance of status.
Simon is weaponizing the conventions of hospitality to publicly signal Jesus' low standing. He's bringing him into his home specifically to show everyone else in the room that Jesus doesn't deserve the baseline respect afforded to an equal.
So what does this all mean? It's less like a standard high society gala and more like inviting a controversial whistleblower to an exclusive country club dinner, specifically to make sure the staff ignores them and the other members can watch them squirm. It's a power play meant to humiliate.
That is exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
But into this carefully staged social performance walks an uninvited woman. The text notes she is a woman in the city who is a sinner, someone with a known reputation.
So the room has already categorized her. She's entirely on the outside of their acceptable religious society. But I have a major logistical question here. How does she even get to his feet to wash them? Like, if they're sitting at a table dining, does she crawl under the table?
It's confusing if you picture a modern table. To understand this, you have to picture the physical mechanics of a first-century Roman triclinium.
A triclinium.
Yeah. They aren't sitting in chairs at a high table. The guests are reclining on low couches arranged in a U shape around a central food table. They lean on their left elbows with their bodies stretched out and their dusty feet extended behind them, away from the food.
Ah, so that physical layout is exactly how a woman could approach from behind without stepping over people or crawling under anything. Jesus' feet are essentially pointing toward the outer perimeter of the room.
Precisely. She stands behind him at his feet, weeping. She washes his feet with her tears, wipes them with her hair, kisses them, and anoints them with costly oil from an alabaster flask.
And letting her hair down in a public room full of men in the first century would have been scandalous on its own.
Oh, incredibly scandalous.
Yeah, but she's publicly providing the very hospitality that Simon refused to give. It's uncomfortable, really. She crashes the party and completely strips the host of his power in his own dining room.
And Simon sits there silently judging the whole thing. The text says he's speaking to himself, thinking, if this man were a prophet, he would have known who and what sort of woman this is who is touching him, for she is a sinner.
But Jesus knows exactly what Simon is thinking, and he knows exactly who the woman is. Jesus responds to Simon's silent contempt with a parable about a moneylender who forgives two debtors, one who owed a massive amount and one who owed a little.
Yeah, Jesus forces Simon to answer his own trap. He asks Simon which debtor will love the moneylender more. Simon reluctantly admits it's the one who had the larger debt canceled.
Right.
Jesus then draws the contrast out loud for the entire room to hear. He points out that Simon gave him no water, no kiss, and no oil, but the woman provided tears, kisses, and ointment.
And then Jesus delivers the final blow in Luke 7:47. Therefore I tell you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. But to whom little is forgiven, the same loves little.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the hanging question at this dinner table isn't theological anymore. It's entirely social. Through that declaration, Jesus completely reverses the room's moral hierarchy.
Because he assumes the authority to declare sins forgiven.
Right, an authority that belonged exclusively to God and the temple system. The woman who came in with a known reputation is declared forgiven and leaves in peace. Simon, the respectable elite host, emerges as the most spiritually impoverished figure in the room.
He takes the power to define who belongs right out of the Pharisees' hands. I mean, the Roman centurion, the marginalized woman, they're elevated as the ultimate examples of faith and love. The religious and political establishment figures, they are exposed as hollow.
It's a profound disruption of the status quo. From the military occupation in Capernaum to the political prisons of Herod to the elite dining rooms of the religious leaders. Every assumption about power, righteousness, and authority is dismantled.
It's incredible. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive today. But before you go, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on the historical drama and these massive social inversions we discussed today. Did the cultural mechanics of the Roman dinner party change how you view the story? Let us know.
There's always more history to uncover.
For sure. And if you enjoyed today's deep dive, make sure to like and subscribe. Also, remind yourself to check the description below for exclusive links to the sources, maps of the Galilee region, and further reading. Now, I want to leave you with a final thought, a lingering question based entirely on today's text.
Oh, this is a good one.
If Jesus is now openly subverting Roman military dynamics, Herodian political power, and the social authority of the Pharisees all at once, who in that room actually has the most to lose? And how long until the establishment strikes back?
It's a ticking clock.
It really is. Well, looking at the text for the very next chapter, the tension doesn't cool off. Jesus doesn't retreat. Instead, he begins traveling through cities and villages, accompanied not just by the 12, but by an entourage of women, including Mary Magdalene, Joanna, and Susanna. And the text notes these women were providing for them out of their own private means. He's building a radically funded, independent movement right under the empire's nose. See you next time.